The Exorcist, a 1973 classic film. What if it was real? Grab a blanket, turn off your lights, and let's exorcise. Exorcise. "18 years and nothing's changed. This has been happening since I was old enough to cry. My mom is sensitive as well as every middle child on her mom's side of the family. Just so happens they were all females, and I, being the oldest of my mom's children and the only male, it just happened to be passed to me. When I was an infant, if my mom left the room and had a baby monitor on, it would instantly go to static, followed by me screaming pale white face and staring at one part of the room, just screaming. I guess it only happened a few times because she's only told me of 3. After I turned 8, I started seeing more and more entities, either pure white blobs or black shadows walking around. I have even heard a few call me a mistake or a doll. It still happens. It was just more shocking then. Skip a few more years, it was pretty repetitive. This is now when I turned 12. I would go to sleep and wake up with scratches all over my body. I woke up once with what seemed to be a burn mark on my back, and it was shaped with a hand. When I showed my mom, she brought me to a psychiatrist or a psychologist to figure out what was going on. They had diagnosed me as bipolar type 1, rapid cycling mixed mania, and clinically depressed. She didn't listen to that, and one Sunday after my church service, she brought me down to talk to the pastor. He had told her that I was touched by both an angel and a darker entity and refused to share what it was. He also made me stay for early afternoon mass, where my mind and body literally weren't mine anymore. Every time he said Jesus or God, my body temperature would shoot up 5 degrees until I was sweating bullets and passed out in the aisle. He released the mass and did a blessing on not only me but everyone in the house, and told my mom I might have some repressed memory which are calling them to me. Since then, I have attempted suicide 3 times, and all 3 times I passed. I know I have, but I came back with a cloud of warmth around me. I've been having flashbacks and night terrors recently, as in the past 3 months, of me as a toddler over my mom's friend's house, and she was molesting me. I know it's real because I can see every color and feel everything she's doing to me. I have tried to come to terms with it, but I'm just disgusted at myself that I blocked it out until now, after so much hell has been caused. It still happens every time I hear God or Jesus, and writing this I have my window wide open and a fan on me. I stopped going to mass because of this, but I still believe there is good above and all around. I haven't started taking the meds until recently, and it has been starting to escalate. I also believe that if you commit suicide, you don't automatically go to hell. It's the hate you carry with you when you pass that makes you go to hell or wherever you believe. Well, maybe it's just me it happened to. Thanks. I just needed to get the general happenings off of my chest. There are more vivid things happening, but I needed to get this out. There's something watching me sleep, and I think you made it angry. My little sister's story. I made an account specifically to tell this story. Now, in more recent years, I found it easier to brush off paranormal stuff, but I can't dismiss this one. This whole account is true and accurate to the best of my memory, and I'm not presenting it as a scary story. This happened 7 years ago. My family got lucky enough to rent a brand new townhouse. This was a godsend for my single mother and her 8 kids. 2 of whom had asthma. Old houses are hard on the lungs. The original development had been burned down by one of the investors after it had fallen to turn a profit, and another company came in and rebuilt it. Since there were only 3 bedrooms, 2 kids got kicked to the unfinished basement. This wasn't as bad as it sounds. We covered the bare walls with sheets and made it a hangout area with a tiny TV and everything. My sister and brother, both younger than me, got a whole floor to themselves basically. After a few weeks, my sister, who was 12, started to come asleep in my room. She kept having nightmares, but she snored like a broken chainsaw, and I was working a full-time job with overtime to help my mom with rent, so I wanted her out again ASAP. I talked things over with her. She was having dreams that some tall, dark shadow was watching her sleep. She called it a him. I did the whole big sister monsters aren't real mentoring thing, but it didn't help. A month goes by. The brother, now sleeping alone in the basements, starts having the same nightmares. I figure it's a case of mass hysteria, but what to do? I needed my sleep. A few years prior, I had gone through a paranormal phase. I read anything and everything I could get my hands on. I grew out of it, but knew just what to do. I made her get a white candle. I took her down to the basement and had her light it and walk in a circle around her bed, singing a hymn. I gave her a canister of salt and instructed her to lay a circle of salt in the same path she walked. I told her that her bed was now protected and nothing real or imagined could get at her through that circle. That night, she slept peacefully in her own bed. The end, I thought. Another month goes by. My sister keeps sleeping in the basement, but not because she wants to, oh no. She confided me that she was now scared to leave her bed at night to come upstairs to my room. He hadn't gone away, you see. He was still there and getting angrier. He was mad at my sister for laying down the salt so he couldn't reach her. My brother followed suit and put down salt around his bed. He said the thing was getting angrier and more dangerous because he wasn't getting what he wanted. I just had enough at this point. In full daylight, I took my brother and sister to the basement. I didn't care whether there was actually a thing in there. I just wanted them to get off my back about it. I faced the spot they said he was. I gave the empty air a good lecture, full of older sibling theory. I googled exorcisms and read one aloud. The one they use in the TV show Supernatural. It was the easiest I could find, and I could hear it out loud so as to not mispronounce anything. Finished by sprinkling some more salt. No more nightmares after that. I don't know if it was real or a product of their minds, but that did the trick. We moved out after a year, and nothing followed. I still don't know what to think about the whole thing, but when I finished reading that exorcism, I swear I felt the hair on my back of my neck stand up, like there had been a breeze. My first experience with an exorcism. Hello Reddit Paranormal. I was asked in a thread posted yesterday to share my experience with some exorcisms I witnessed. The following account is entirely true, witnessed firsthand, with no embellishment whatsoever. That said, this is the internet, so I take no offense if you don't believe my account. Here goes. A bit of backstory first, to give some context. I am a 24-year-old man, born and raised Jamaican, currently attending medical school in Jamaica. I am in my final year, and as a matter of fact, just got home from one of my final exams. I was born with a rare illness that I was not aware of until I was 13, but had suffered severe pain and teasing throughout my childhood as a result. More on that in a bit. My mom and dad were and are very caring and loving parents, but early on in my life, they both had jobs which required them to work late hours. This means that after school and some nights would be spent at my mom's mother's house. We are a traditional Indian family, so schoolwork always came first. But after that, I played Super Nintendo and watched Power Rangers until I fell asleep or was picked up by my parents. It was at my grandparents' house at the tender age of 4 that I had my first paranormal experience. I don't remember much. I just remember seeing a red-eyed shadow, crying my eyes out, and simultaneously and thoroughly pissing my shorts. That opened me up to the paranormal, to where I'm able to sense and see all sorts of spirits, evil and otherwise, plus other gifts. I grew up Christian because of my dad, but my family hardly went to church until I was diagnosed at 13. I think I only saw the inside of a church 4 times. When I was diagnosed, it was pretty devastating, life-shattering even. Learning you have a painful, debilitating, deforming, degenerative, incurable genetic disease is pretty rough at that age. It was rough for my parents too, more than I probably knew. Shortly after, my family found God again, and we started going to church, one after another, just checking them out to see which one would fit. Here comes the bit you were waiting for. In early 2004, we found this church in the parish next to ours. I was rough around the edges, but the pastor was a nice guy, and the small congregation was welcoming, so we thought, let's give this one a shot. After attending church for a few Sundays, Pastor asked myself and my parents to drop in to see him the upcoming Wednesday. We arrived that Wednesday not really knowing what to expect, but we were told to come at a precise time. We arrived, and the conversation was inconsequential. Just him trying to comfort me, asking what I wanted to be, etc. This went on for half an hour before his landline rang. He spoke for about 2 minutes and hung up. This was before cell phones had color screens or even cameras. They took a while to catch on. He told us he had an engagement and we were free to leave. We were kind of puzzled because he went from calm and relaxed to a bit rushed and seemed eager to get us out. My dad pulled him aside and asked what the deal was. He said this was a deliverance day where they would attempt exorcisms on people who had been mentally and physically evaluated and found healthy despite having issues. Apparently, he was well known for this and at a high success rate. My dad, being an oddly curious guy, asked if we could watch. Pastor eventually relented and said, yes, but not from where we sit on Sundays. You will stay by the very entrance and leave immediately if I tell you. My mom was rather pissed, but myself being a huge horror junkie and having seen The Exorcist maybe 20 times on VHS, and my dad were very interested, but also a bit freaked. Maybe 10 minutes later, this middle-aged black woman walked in, supported by those who I assume were family and part of the congregation. By supported, I mean physically. For someone who I told was later 45, she looked haggard, tired, and rather skinny and weak. She looked to be in her late 70s, to be honest. They were all greeted by Pastor, who then guided them to set her down on a chair in the aisle toward the front. I saw Pastor walk towards us and into his office. I heard some rummaging around and saw him come down with 4 black belts that looked to be the width and thickness of a normal men's belt, but with holes way, way down. Horrified, I asked, Pastor, where on earth are you going with 4 thick belts? He responded with a slightly surprised and amused look. They're leather, and for restraint, son, to restrain that lady there, who has the demon in her. I was now totally captivated and thought, well, that's kind of overkill for a tiny skinny lady, but okay. I'd soon know I was wrong. Pastor asked the lady's consent for the exorcism, and she warily agreed. He and 3 other strong-looking guys proceeded to use the belts to restrain her hands and legs. He, along with the 3 other men, took out some worn-looking books out of a leather sheath thing, and thus it began. As soon as she caught sight of the books, the lady began to panic and plead, cry, and beg to be let go. They did not listen. Pastor then took this little bottle of blessed olive oil from his suit pocket and recited something as he made the sign of the cross on her head. She cried out and tugged at the restraints, but to no avail. At this point, I was very skeptical and disappointed. The 4 then began to read some script from the books, some in English, some in what I suspect was Latin. She was becoming more and more agitated, yanking with all of her might at the belts and trying to get up with the chair. Now, I realized the reason the chair was temporarily bolted to the ground. Pastor then reached into his pocket once more and pulled out a small silver flask, poured some of the clear liquid into his hand, and threw it on the lady. This is where shit hit the fan. She screamed so loud that I thought my eardrums would burst. Not only that, but there was her voice and a deeper sort of baritone male voice, saying, "Stop it, you self-righteous fucks." It was at this point that I noticed that even though she was tugging at the restraints and kind of standing a bit, the chair beneath her was vibrating and moving like crazy without her really even touching it. He ignored this and began to recite scripture about the armor of God, to which the woman laughed in that dual falsetto baritone voice. Pastor looked at her sternly and said, "From here on, I'm not speaking to the woman's name, but the demon inside. Come forth, demon." And then he bopped her on the head with the Bible. Now, there was only a deep scream and then a deep, malicious laugh. "You wanted to see me, sir." It continued until he got the demon's name. I forget what it was, but it wasn't any of the ones you hear in movies and TVs. He called out to it to come out and leave the woman in Jesus' name, but it was fighting and tugging at the restraints. Then, the crazy broke loose. He commanded it, and in response, she stood up as much as the restraints would allow and arched her back to some crazy angle. All the while, her eyes rolled back with her mouth fully open and staying open. We heard in the deep voice, "No, she is mine." And suddenly, a brass collection plate that was on the stage flew on its own in their direction, so they had to move to not be hit. At that point, my eyes went wide and I thought, oh fuck, it's all real, it's all been real. I've seen fucking demons in my own house. Just then, as Pastor was commanding this thing to leave, it snapped a hand restraint, and I saw the podium, solid mahogany, burst into pieces like it had been hooked up to C4. The men restrained her until eventually the demon left. I know because I saw it leave the woman and disappear. Not like on Supernatural though, it just kind of defused with her body and disappeared. So, that was my first experience. Voices coming from a fully open mouth with words being said that you would need jaw and tongue articulation for, a brass collection plate flying across a room on its own, and solid wood pulpit breaking to pieces. Think whatever you may like, but as far as I'm concerned, exorcisms, demons, spirits, it's all real. Respect.